We are continuing our Twin Ports music tour, and I've got Toddzilla on the phone with me from Nashville. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you, Chris?
Very good, thank you. So,
Good.
I've featured you or shown off some of your music at different points over the years, and I just thought it'd be interesting for everybody to get to know you. You are in Nashville, and when did you start getting into music? What was your first instrument?
Oh man, I was the first. Well, what first got me into music, interested in music. Strangely enough, I have an older sister who's an opera singer.
Uh huh.
She's a lot older than me. She's like 15 years older than me. I was the baby boy of four kids. Had three older sisters, and my oldest sister. I was kind of an oops. I came along pretty late. So,
Okay.
my oldest sister is like 15 years older than me. So by the time I was, basically old enough to walk, she was already going to college or just about to go to college. And she studied music at the North Carolina School of the Arts. And she was an opera singer, like a full-on opera singer. She sang at the Met, and she's
Wow.
lived up in the Northeast, up around New York and stuff for years and years and years. And she's kind of retired, and she's living in South Carolina in Myrtle Beach, and is teaching. But I used to go to her recitals when I was barely old enough to walk, so that got me into music early on. And I always had it was strange. I always had sort of a fixation about music. They told me that when I was like 3 and 4 years old, I used to have a collection of 45 records, 45s,
Uh huh.
that I was a little bitty, skinny, tiny kid. So I would carry them around on my arm. I could put my hand through the hole, and I could actually like carry the 45 records around on my arm as a little kid. Had a stack of about 20 of them that I just, and there was a record store downtown in my hometown of Greensboro.
Uh huh.
There was an old record store that had a big giant display in the window. It's like a downtown shop where they have windows on either side of the door,
Yeah.
and there was a big round, probably about 6 foot tall, 6 foot diameter. It was a piece of wood that had been painted to look like a record. And my mother told me that I would cry every day until she would load me up in the car and drive me downtown so that I could see my record.
Your record.
And they had my folks had one of those console stereos. It was like a beautiful piece of furniture that's with the lid that slides open,
Yeah.
and had the radio in it and the stereo in it, and just the speakers built onto the side. It was just really beautiful. Well, they had to put a little padlock on that because I would try to open up. I'd climb up on the thing and I'd open it up and try to ride around on the turntable.
Oh no.
These are all true stories from my family. And so I was kind of fixated with music right off the bat, really early on. And when I hit I want to say about the fifth grade,
Hmm.
I think, I started playing in the band. I was first chair clarinet for about 5 years.
Okay.
I played clarinet for 4 years, up until about the ninth grade, going into 10th grade. And I played clarinet for a long time, and started that about, fifth grade. And then about a year after that, um, one of my friends turned me on to Kiss, which most people in my generation, that's kind of a lot of guys that are rock guys. That's where they started, was Kiss, because Kiss was the biggest thing in the world, but right at that time.
Yes.
And so one of my friends had a 45. Back to the 45s. He had a 45 of Rock and Roll All Night, and I said, "What is that? Who's that?" And he said, "Well, that's Kiss." And I started doing a little bit of research on the side or whatever, found out what Kiss was about. So 12 years old, I was completely all gone into it. And then when my sister was getting married, maybe I wasn't quite 12 yet. My sister was getting married. My middle sister was getting married, and it was 1977, because I remember I was 11 years old.
Okay.
And she had some friends that she had gone to high school with that threw her a bridal shower, but it was kind of a bridal shower for the whole family and not just for the women, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
everybody was kind of there. And the two people that threw the shower were two high school friends of hers that had already gotten married, and their names were Tom and Michelle. And Tom was a guitar player. We went over to their house, and I'm an 11-year-old kid with all these adults, and I don't, I just wanted to kind of hang out. I didn't care to sit around and listen to them talk. So I'm walking around their house, and Tom had a room where he had his instruments, and he had an old Stratocaster and an old Gibson SG sitting out on stands. And I was 11 years old. I walked in the room, and that was the first time that I'd ever been like within like 2 feet of an electric guitar. And I thought it was the coolest looking thing I'd ever seen in my life. So the next day, my mother was standing there washing dishes, and I walked into the kitchen and I announced, "Mom, I think I want to learn how to play the electric guitar." And she turned and she looked at me and she said, "What?" Where did that come from? And I told her, I said, "Well, we were at Tom and Michelle's last night, and I saw those guitars, and I think I want to learn how to play electric guitar." Well, my mom didn't know diddly squat about, guitars or any of that. The only thing she really knew music-wise was her daughter, the opera singer, and so we had a piano in the house for her and that kind of stuff. And, but they didn't know anything. My parents didn't know anything about that kind of thing. So she called up Tom and told Tom, "Well, Todd saw your guitars, and now he thinks he might want to learn to play guitar." And Tom, probably one of the kindest acts anybody probably ever did, he said, "Well, why don't you bring him over and let me sit him down and put the guitar in his hands and show him a couple of things and see if he has any kind of, aptitude for it, see if he takes to it." Because he said some people do and some people don't.
Yeah.
And so my mom said, "Sure." So it loaded me up in the car at some point, took me over there, and I sat down with Tom, and he picked up the Stratocaster and he handed me the old Gibson SG, and he said, "Okay, here's how you make an E chord." And he showed me, and I did it. And he looked at me and he said, "Well, here's how you make an A chord." And he showed me, and I did it. "Here's the D chord." And he showed me, and I did it. And he said, "Can you show me the E chord?" And I did it. And he told my mom, he said, "This boy's like a duck swimming." so what ended up happening was Tom gave me some lessons, probably out of the goodness of his heart. I think my mom kicked him a little bit of money for his time or whatever. But so for a few months, I would go over there like every Friday night or whatever. I can't remember when it was, but I'd go over there and I would, play with Tom, or I'd sit and he would give me lessons. And after a while, he told my mom, he said, "Well, I've taken him about as far as I can, but he's really got an aptitude for this. You really need to get him like a real guitar teacher." So she took me to some music store and got me, music lessons from, an actual guitar teacher. And there you go.
There we
off
go.
And running.
Wow.
And I figured out really, really fast that carrying a guitar case looked a lot cooler than carrying a clarinet case.
You're talking about to the girls, right?
Yeah. Well, what do you think, man? So,
I mean, in general, comparing it to just in general, or the girls.
Well, let me just say, if you're walking down in the hallway through junior high and you got a clarinet case, okay, what do you think that's going to do? But if you walk through junior high with a guitar case, oh, they all want to talk to you.
And it's a different type of girl that wants to talk to you, too.
Well, I'll let you be the judge of that.
Yeah.
But, that kind of, it really did. And so by about the 9th grade, and then the other thing was when I got into high school, our high school started at 10th grade. And when I got into high school, I did not want to march in the marching band. I didn't want to do that. I want to play music. I didn't want to walk around on a field wearing a bad costume.
Right.
So,
right.
so I kind of got out of the high school band thing and focused more on playing guitar. And so then I spent my formative high school years sitting on the foot of my bed learning how to play guitar. So
nice. So as you're in high school learning how to play guitar, who were some of the early influences on you?
Well, again, like I said, it started with Kiss, and then this actually to be honest, right about the time that I had started really getting into guitar and gotten a guitar of my own. I was about, 12 or so. By that time, I was had been playing about a year. I stumbled into a record store one day. My mom took me to the mall, and she was going into JCPenney to look at sheets or some crap, and I didn't
Right.
I didn't want to stand there and do that. So there was a record bar right outside the JCPenney, and I said, "Mom, can I just go to the record store and hang out until you're ready to go?" And she said, "Yeah, go ahead." So I went into the record store, and I'm walking around, and there's this music playing. This was back in the day where they would have the LP out and they would play it in the store, and they, would have the thing up on the wall that said "now playing," and they would put the album cover up on the little shelf.
Yep.
So I'm walking around, and there's this thing playing, and it sounds like, it sounded like, I don't know, it sounded like Japanese planes dropping bombs or something. I was just like, what is this? And so I go to go up to the record counter, and I in my mind, I remember this as this. I walked up to the record counter, and there was this guy behind the counter, and for the world, I remember him as like Spicoli from Fast Times at Ridgemont, blonde hair, just kind of over it, sort of a stoner,
right.
Working in a record store, about 18, 19 years old. So this 12-year-old kid comes up and goes, "Excuse me, sir, what is this that's playing?" And he just kind of looks at me, and he looks down at me very condescendingly, kind of rolls his eyes, and he says, "It's this new band, man. They're called Van Halen, man. Check them out. They're really cool." And I looked up on the thing, and I saw this album cover. So I went over and I went to the V section, and I'm like, Van Cliburn, Van Morrison, Van Halen. And I picked this album up, and I looked at the cover, and the first thing that caught my eye was, if you remember the cover, and I know you do.
Yep.
If I looked at the cover, and the first thing I thought was, that bass player looks like Gene Simmons. He's got like wings or something coming out of his back.
Yeah.
And the drummer is on fire. What the hell? And the singer, he's standing there, and he's got his shirt all unbuttoned and stuff. And I was like, well, okay, whatever. And then I looked, and I was like, that guitar has stripes on it. That's the coolest thing I've never seen a guitar with stripes on it before. Then I flipped the album cover over, and there's Dave on the back doing the back bend, and I was like, oh hell, I'm getting this.
Yeah.
So I pulled out my mowing the yard money that I had about $10 in my pocket, and I walked up there and I slapped that money on the counter, and I took that record home. Well, the thing was, as soon as I started playing the record, I just fell in love with it, and I immediately sat down and started trying to learn the songs. Went and took a couple, went to my guitar teacher and see, I didn't know, I was 12 years old. I didn't know that Eddie Van Halen was revolutionizing guitar music at that moment. I was just a dumb 12-year-old kid who just happened to walk into a store and discovered it on my own.
That
turned me on.
That could have broken you. I mean, because he's doing such new stuff.
But I was like a sponge, and I didn't know. I didn't have the preconceived notion that, oh my God, this is untouchable. I just said, that sounds cool. I want to learn how to do that.
Okay.
So I spent the next 2 years or so figuring that stuff out. Okay. So went to my guitar teacher, and he was like, oh, all you kids want to learn Van Halen. And plus he was, now he was probably somebody who was freaking out because he didn't know what the hell he was supposed to teach me because he didn't know how to do it.
Right.
But I sat down, and I started messing around with it, and I started, because I always had a real good ear, and I had the capability of kind of being able to figure things out on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll never forget, I was sitting on my bed, and all of a sudden I figured out the tapping thing. I was like, wait a minute, that note's here, and that note's way up here, and, well, my hand's not that long, and his hand's not that long, and I literally took my index finger, and I went, but the note is here, and then I went doink, 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 doink. And I went, oh my God, I understand how he's doing it. And I figured it out. So I'm like 13, 14 years old. I go to my first jam session with a bunch of other guys, right? That are like maybe a year or two older than me. There was a football player. His name was Brian Andrews. Okay.
Right.
And he was kind of one of the popular guys because he's a football player, but he also played guitar. And he was like a year ahead of me. So he comes up to me, and this was at junior high school. He comes up to me one day, and I'm in my locker, and he's like standing next to me, and I knew him. We'd been friends for a few years through school.
Okay.
And he looked at me and he said, "Hey, Todd," he said, "somebody told me that you're learning to play guitar." And I said, "Well, yeah." And he said, "Well, we're having a jam session this Saturday. Me and Chris Bland and Sean Post and some other guys. All these guys that were just kind of popular dudes. And I was a nobody. I was a nerd.
Right.
I was invisible. I was invisible."
Uh-huh.
And so he stops and he says, "You want to come over and jam with us?" And I was like, "Wow, really?" So I said, "Sure." So, Saturday comes and go over to Brian's house, and all these guys are in there. Sean Post playing drums, Chris Bland's in there, and Brian's in there, and they're all playing guitars, and they're they're playing they're playing like well, let's see. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it, but I got a guitar here.
Yeah.
But they were all playing like AC/DC.
Yeah.
Right, they were all playing like and what they were doing. And remember now, we're talking about like 14 years old, maybe.
Okay. Yeah.
But then they wouldn't do that part because they couldn't figure it out, and then they'd start over. So right, and then they were playing like what else were they playing? Just stuff like that.
Right.
Real easy stuff.
All the stuff that came out in the early 80s.
Right. And,
yeah.
and that 14-year-olds would play. Right.
Uh-huh.
and like Sweet Home Alabama. And I'm just kind of standing around because I don't really know any of these songs and I don't really know what I'm doing. And I'm kind of uncomfortable and I'm just kind of trying to kind of play along, and watch their hands, and I'm real intimidated.
Right.
Just didn't know what to do. So at some point in time, they decided to take a break, and they were all sitting out in the living room in Brian's parents' house. And, we were, they were all, I was young. I was like 14 years old. And these guys, they started smoking. But the funny thing was they only had like one cigarette and they were all passing it around.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I didn't smoke, and I didn't know what it was. I just thought they were smoking a cigarette, but because we were kids, they were too poor and only had one cigarette, so they were just passing it around. Sorry. So anyway, like I said, I'm naive, dumb kid. So I go back. So I'm kind of like, kind of shy, and I'm like, I don't feel like smoking. So I went back into the room, and they're all out in the living room. And I go back into the room and I put my guitar back on and I'm kind of sort of quietly in there. And I think I started playing like Ain't Talking About Love.
Okay.
And I'm playing, and all of a sudden I hear somebody go, "What are you doing?" And I looked up, and Brian and all the other guys were standing in the doorway. And I was like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was just, I don't know. I was just playing some songs I know. And they were looking at me incredulously. And Brian just goes, "Are you playing Van Halen?" Yeah. And they looked at each other and they looked at me and they went, "We don't know any Van Halen." And from then on, I was like the coolest guy. Because they just blew their mind. And then the next Monday, I go back to work. I go back to school, right?
Uh-huh.
And I'm standing there at my locker. Now there was this really, really, really cute girl that was Brian's age. She was a year older than me.
Okay.
And her name was Tammy Kerr. And I had the biggest crush on her. She was like the most beautiful girl in school. She did not know I even existed as far as I did. And I'm standing there at my locker, and I'm undoing my locker, and all of a sudden, it was one of those things, just like in a movie. I had my locker door open, and I shut the locker door, and all of a sudden, she's standing there leaning on the locker,
okay,
with her shoulder up against the locker. And I'm like, "Hi," and she goes, "Hi," and I'm like, "Hi," and she says, "So Brian tells me that you know how to play Van Halen, dude." My life was on at that point. There was no way, no way that I was ever going to do anything else from that moment forward. It was like that. All of a sudden, that girl was like, "So, you know how to play Van Halen?" You damn right I
I'm gonna learn every single song.
do. I sure did.
Oh
I
my
sure
God, that
did.
was, and I remember that too. Every kid that could play Van Halen at Schmidt Music or at school, they were automatically cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was just kind of. And the funny thing for me was, as influences go, I think the thing that I love about that the most is that, when you're young, you have your older siblings that might turn you on to music, or friends in the neighborhood that might turn you on to music, or whatever, friends at school
Hmm.
that say, "Hey, check this out, listen to this." I discovered them completely on my own, and from then on, they were like my band forever.
Yeah.
It was just like they were my boys, because I remember when the second record came out, I happened to be in some store and I saw the album and I was like, "Oh, cool." So I immediately had to buy that one. And every record that came out, I was right on top of it. And so to me, as influences go, that was one of the most important ones, mostly because I found it myself. You
Right.
know,
Right.
my sisters turned me on to the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and Eric Clapton, but I found Van Halen. So it was very, very special to me. So that became a big thing. Then, as I got older, obviously, you know, guys our age, it was MTV hit and music was everywhere. You
Yeah.
know, by the time I was a senior in 1984, and to me, there still has not been a bigger year in music than 1984, 1985, right around that area. I mean, you had so much stuff happening. You had, Michael Jackson had just had Thriller. You had Bruce Springsteen, Born in the USA. You had Purple Rain, of course.
Yeah.
You had so much stuff that was coming down the pike. Def Leppard was huge. The Eurythmics, it just was on and on and on. Madonna, and just so much music crammed into so much small space. The Police, and just so much stuff happening. And it just, to me, I look back on that year of my life, and being a senior in 1984, there ain't no way I could have done anything but wanted to be a musician,
Right.
because all the music that was pouring out of everywhere at that point in time.
And it was all different styles. It was everything was splintering, and it was every type of
Yes,
instrument was the lead. So it was a great variety of artists.
it was huge. I mean, there was so much of a varied tapestry of music being made and going on, and it was the most important thing in the world at that point in time. I mean, when Live Aid happened a few years later, it was like, the whole world was music centric at that point in time.
Yeah, because music could do anything at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a kid that had been dragging around 45 records on his arm his whole life, obviously I had a music bug from the beginning. And so for me, it was just, that was it. That was it. It just was something that, never stopped, and it still hasn't.
It's a perfect segue that you brought me to that and the variety of music, because you are in a ton of different bands with a ton of different styles of music.
Well, I have been, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. They're not this at certain points in time. One of the things that I've kind of really been very, very proud of as I've gotten older is that I look back on a lot of the music that I have made, and you know, I really have done my fair share of growing and evolving. Because for years and years, I just wanted to be Eddie Van Halen like everybody else,
Yeah.
and I was trying to be in a hard rock band and did that for years and years and years. But one thing that kind of, I wanted to go back just for a split second and say that when I heard Prince, that really kind of changed a lot of my attitude about expanding music, my particular tastes in music, because even on that one record on Purple Rain, there's so many different types of songs.
None of his albums are the same.
Right. And it's, on the same album, he'll switch gears every song, it seems. It's just like you've got a hard rock song, a real grinding thing like Darling Nikki, and then you've got a dance pop thing like When Doves Cry, and, then, Purple Rain itself, of course. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's just like gospel all day long, I mean, there's just so much stuff involved in that. And I looked, and a buddy of mine that was playing bass with me in that at that time, we had a little high school band, and we were trying to just be rockers, and he said, "Have you seen Purple Rain yet?" And I was like, "Nah, it's not really my thing. I don't think." And he said, "No, you need to see this, because you need to see this movie." And so he dragged me, and the movie had been out for several months already. I kind of missed the boat,
Mm-hmm.
and he took me to that movie, and we went to like one of those little midnight movie things where
Right.
there was nobody in the theater but us, because
Uh-huh.
everybody had already seen the damn thing. And he sat me down, and we watched the movie, and I was just, from the moment he jumped up on that speaker and did that solo at the end of Let's Go Crazy, I was like, oh, this guy, this is something else, and then for the whole rest of the movie, he's just, every time he performs, it was unbelievable. So that really kind of made me really get into the funk thing.
Uh-huh.
And I had always skirted around that kind of stylistically. I never, let's put it this way. When I played guitar, I just wanted to rock, but when I listened to music, I listened to a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I remember when disco was big, my
Yeah.
sisters were all dancing to it, and hell, I'd get up there and dance too. And I was one of the only kids in junior high school, one of the only white kids that would actually get out there and dance.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be out on the dance floor with some little black girl just going at it, just having a great time, because I had the school that I went to was it was like 50% black, 50% white.
Uh-huh.
Okay. It was not, there was not nearly the kind of segregation that there were in some areas, and so all the schools that I went to were always very evenly balanced. So I had a lot of black friends and a lot of white friends, and my white friends were all listening to Van Halen and AC/DC, and my black friends were listening to Prince and P-Funk.
Right.
And I was kind of getting all of it, okay, because
Uh-huh.
I was hanging out with all of them. My first actual band, I had two black guys singing lead, a girl drummer, and me and another white guy. He was the bass player. That's the guy that took me to the show, to the movie. But, we were a very kind of eclectic band right off the bat. That was my first band. It was, multi-gender and, multiracial right off the bat.
Yeah.
So anyway, I banged my head against the wall here in Nashville for years and years and years, wanting to be a rocker in country music city.
Yeah.
And the thing that brought me here was I came here to go to school. I went to Middle Tennessee State, studied recording engineering and production, and learned how to make records, and sort of never left.
Yeah.
Life gets in the way, and you end up staying somewhere. And I was kind of a bit of a fish out of water for a long time, because Nashville's not what it is today. Today you can do any kind of music you want here. But back then, in the 80s and early 90s, it was a little bit of a struggle, to be playing rock music.
Yeah. If you didn't do country, I wouldn't say you were shunned, but you were ignored.
Well, they were just like, why are you here? Because
Yeah.
that's not what we do here,
Yep.
And so, we did that for a long, long time. And then there was a point in time where I kind of had one of those wipeouts where, the whole band fell apart, and it was time to put the band back together and do the thing. And I kind of remembered one of the bands that I really, really, really loved growing up, that I had, again, kind of stumbled onto because I went to a concert where they were on the bill. And that was Mother's Finest, band
Mm-hmm.
out of Atlanta.
Yeah.
And Mother's Finest, to me, they bridge the gap in between Sly and the Family Stone and Living Colour. They were the original black funk rock band to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw them the first time, they just blew my head off, and I always loved what they did, because I like music that makes you move. I always have liked that kind of something that has that kind of a groove and that kind of a thing that makes you want to dance or makes you want to move. That's probably why I liked Van Halen as much as I did, because there was a swing to it. It was very danceable.
And melodic.
It's music, right, and melodic. And I wasn't ever really into like really hard heavy metal or any of that kind of stuff. Even as a guitar player, it didn't really do it for me. You go back and you listen to some of the really coolest Led Zeppelin stuff. It's got a groove to it that is just undeniable, and that's kind of what makes it. It's kind of what sets it apart. So I was really into Mother's Finest, and I really liked what they did a lot in terms of blending the rock and funk thing. And I made a purposeful decision to kind of change gears and sort of turn away from the harder rock thing and kind of bring a little bit of the funk element into what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And I've sort of been stuck there ever since.
And I remember that because, I've been following your career from a point to a point, and I remember you starting in rock, and I remember when you sent me that next record, and it was like, right. Whoa, this is different.
Right.
This is really different from what you did on the last thing.
Mm-hmm. And it was an actual purposeful step in a different direction. And it's an effort to grow and also an effort to do something that's going to, the thing about the music business is that the way that you get anywhere in the music business is you do something that gets you attention one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And I never was a person who was ever interested in just repeating what somebody else did. You look at all the hair metal bands of the 80s that were all trying to emulate Van Halen, but they weren't really doing a real good job. It was like a carbon copy when it's, or a Xerox copy when it's like 5 or 6 generations down the line and it gets really blurry.
It didn't have the soul.
It just didn't have any soul.
Yeah.
And I never really wanted to just emulate somebody else. Like you can hear bands on the radio all the time that just, oh, well, that sounds like so-and-so. Then, they're just this band over here. Somebody told me one time that the music business is like a fishing boat. Guy over here reels in a big fish and everybody runs over and casts their line in that spot until the boat leans that direction.
Yeah.
Except for this guy over here that says, screw that, I'm just going to stay over here. Then he pulls in a big fish and everybody runs over, then they cast in that spot. Well, it's the same, same kind of thing. And I never had any desire to do anything like that. I just wanted to write the music that I felt and write good songs and kind of try to experiment a little bit. My studio background was a big part of the fact that I wasn't somebody who was ever just going to go, okay, just stick a mic on the thing and just play and that's it. No, I always wanted to kind of mess with the sounds and try to get something unique and something different.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. You take one look at me and figure out that I don't fit in anybody's damn box. I've been carrying around this weird haircut for about 25 years now and wearing suits and stuff. I kind of got into that when we started doing the funk thing. We just wanted to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
We wanted to do something that would put us outside of the box. And this was probably late 90s when we decided, when the band that I had called the Jones,
mm-hmm.
we decided to, okay, our look is going to be, we're basically going to steal clothes out of Marstay's closet. But be like white guys playing funk rock,
mm-hmm.
but wearing suits. And the suit thing just kind of stuck, and it became kind of a trademark for me that everybody associated with, oh, that's the dude in the suit with the hairdo and the thing. And I just kind of never let it go.
And it's
Plus,
not,
I like wearing nice clothes. So,
and they're not new style suits either. These are classic suits that you guys wear.
Yeah, I kind of like zoot suits, kind of that kind of stuff, and just it's really high fashion kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Again, think like I stole something out of Marstay's closet. It's kind of loud. You got shoes that have like sparkles and leopard and crap on them.
Right.
But it's just it's in the effort to get some attention and to be different, and it kind of just stuck. And for me, I've been doing it here for so long that now, people in Nashville really associate me with that, and they know who I am because of that style and because of the fact that I just don't do what everybody else does. I kind of just do my own thing.
And you've been doing a little bit of a Prince show, too, that is phenomenal.
Yeah, well, a few years ago, I was asked to join a Prince tribute band, and I was out on the road with them for a couple of years.
Hmm.
They had the guy that was their, we'll call him Prince, I guess sort of an impersonator or whatever, but the guy that dressed up like Prince and did the thing.
Yep.
He could sing like him, he could dance like him. He couldn't play guitar, so they hired me to do all the guitar parts, and they knew that I knew all that stuff anyway because I was kind of so into it by that time.
Hmm.
And so I spent a couple of years on the road with them, and then that kind of ran its course, and I left that band. I came home, then my house burned down, and I dealt with all that stuff, a kind of a bad personal tragedy, and having to have my house
Yeah.
rebuilt, that kind of stuff. But in the meantime, that I decided to put together the latest project that I've been working with. It's kind of like a rock and roll circus. It's called Toddzilla's Rip Roaring Rock and Roll Big Top, and it's cover songs, but it's kind of offbeat cover songs that people haven't heard in a long time. A lot of it's kind of that MTV era that I grew up in, and things like Saga on the Loose. You never hear anybody play that. Well, we
Yeah.
play that, and just things like that that are kind of a little bit more. It's not your run of the mill cover band that's just being a jukebox. We're trying to play things that kind of make people sit up and go, "Oh wow, I remember that song. That's really cool." And the other side of it is we have all these circus performers, aerialists. Um, one girl does like a grinder where she's got the belt and then she takes the grinder and it shoots sparks across the room.
Yeah. Yep.
And contortionists and things like that are like circus performers. And they actually perform around us while we're playing the song. So it's like this really big, huge spectacle. And my fiance, Abby,
Hmm.
who is a burlesque performer herself and producer here in Nashville, a burlesque producer, she produces shows. And she got involved and she knew all these circus people. And so she hooked me up with these circus folks. And she's been chasing me around for the last couple of years saying, you should do a Prince show. You should do a Prince show. You should do a Prince show. Everybody knows that you do the Prince. They know you do it well. You should do the Prince show. And I was kind of like, I was in that band and I kind of was taking a break from that. And I was kind of a little standoffish, plus if we couldn't do it like really, really well, I didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
Well, the band just got to a point where the guys that are playing with me are just so tremendous that it was like, okay, we can really pull off just about anything. Okay.
Hmm.
And the keyboard player, to do Prince, you got to have a keyboard player that's really on his game. And this guy is just phenomenal. His name's Joey Hodge, and he's unbelievable. The guy's like a human octopus. He can just play so much stuff. And so I said, okay, well, let's give this a shot. So we put together this Prince show that it was intended to just be a one-off Prince tribute show.
Yep.
And it went over like gangbusters. The place was packed. Exit In, famed club in Nashville. We had it there.
Quite large too.
It's very large, and word of mouth got out, and old Toddzilla's doing Prince, and the show was such a huge hit, and everybody had such a great time, and the circus stuff blended with it, and we just did so much really cool stuff, and everybody loved it. And then after the show, I didn't even make it back to the dressing room. And the drummer, Christopher Williams, who actually plays for the German metal band Accept, he plays with them on the road. He's a good friend, and he had done the show, and he turned to me and he said, "When are we going to do that again?" And I just kind of laughed. And then I walked up the hallway to the dressing room, and everybody was standing outside the dressing room. All the performers were like, "When can we do that again? Let's do that again." And so we decided to kind of do something with it. And so we've booked some gigs, and barring the pandemic that we all got to get through and get past at this point in time, once everything settles back down, we had some gigs booked. We may have to cancel them, but we obviously are making steps to go take it out on the road a little bit. It's a little tricky because it's not just a band. It's all this other stuff involved.
It's a big show.
Right. And I have to be careful to pick my venue properly so that these girls can hang their aerial stuff from the ceiling and do all this stuff. And it's a big production.
Mm-hmm.
So taking it on the road, it's not the easiest thing in the world to do, because instead of 4 or 5 people in a band, you're talking about 10 or 12 people at least. So that's a lot moving parts.
Yeah.
So we were scheduled to play at Songbirds in Chattanooga, which is where they also have the amazing Songbirds Guitar Museum in Chattanooga. And we worked a deal up with those guys, and we're supposed to play down there on May the 22nd, but at this point, it's probably looking like we're going to have to push it down the line a bit.
Yeah.
But we're in the process of getting out and doing something with it. We just got to wait for all this stuff to blow over. But you know, we're real excited about it because it really, really went over big, and I love playing his music. I really, really do. It's so much fun, and so it makes people so happy. That's one of the things I learned when I was out on the road with the other band, is that it just, everywhere you go, if you're going to play Prince, if you're doing it anywhere close to right, the place is going to be packed, and people are just going to absolutely love what you're doing because everybody loves his music.
Yeah. And you have to, with him, you have to do it right because he was such a perfectionist on doing a great show with great music and having a great band behind him. Anything less than that is not a good show.
Well, right. And, I mean, he was the Mozart of our time, and
Yeah.
you have to be able to do that justice in some way, and I spent so much time really learning the music, and of course because I'd always been a fan. Then when I got involved in that tribute band, I was the guitar player. I was like, okay, if this white guy with big hair is going to be standing over here in this purple suit playing the Prince licks, the people need to know that I'm here for a reason, which is, okay, he knows how to do it right. So I studied it really, really hard, and I really, really worked hard. And right about the time we got the band off the ground, Prince passed away.
Yeah. And
it was devastating for all of us that were in that tribute band. It was just a devastating thing it was like our hero was just, I don't have to tell you, you live up.
He was my hero. I grew up
it was such a shock.
Yeah, I grew up in Minnesota, and he was the guy that inspired me because here's this guy from Minnesota, and he loves Minnesota and won't leave Minnesota, and
right.
He's got all this talent, and he plays all of his own instruments and produces himself.
Right. And it was just, it was such a devastating blow, but it really made me, if anything, it made me connect even more with the music, and it became more important that I really, really, really be able to do it right.
Mm-hmm.
So I really, really, really studied it really hard and worked really hard when I was in that tribute band. So now that I'm doing this, I bring it to this project, and we're able to really microscope it. And Christopher, the drummer that I've mentioned, I mean, he put together a drum kit that every single thing that he could hit had a trigger on it. And he actually went down the rabbit hole, and he sampled all of the Prince songs. Like, if we're playing Raspberry Beret, it's actually the kick drum and the snare drum from Raspberry Beret. So you can imagine what that sounds like.
Yeah.
It's during the rehearsals, I was having a hard time playing and singing because I kept turning around going, damn, listen to that. That sounds amazing. And then the keyboard player, Joey, he kind of saw that, and he was like, oh, okay, well, if that's the way it's going to be. Next thing I know, he comes in, and I'm like, did you go to Paisley Park and steal his keyboards? Because everything sounds perfect. So I had to up my game,
Yeah.
I really had to up my game. So it turned out to be such a really wonderful thing that's kind of why we're running with it, So yeah, it's a cool thing. I've got a little website for that particular thing. It's just a strictly for the Big Tops version of that Prince show, and it's the website is ToddZillaRocks.wixsite. That's WIXSITE.com /Big Top.
Okay.
BIGTOP. And it's just a little website that we're using to promote just that show. You can see the Big Top stuff also on Facebook. It's facebook.com /RNR Big Top.
Okay.
And I've got a couple of websites too that have my original music on it that I guess we're going to talk a little bit about some of that too.
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. So yeah,
You know?
so why don't you mention a little bit about that? I guess the thing that I could do is I can just share all the sites and everybody can discover you. And if you don't mind, now that you've talked about all the Prince stuff, um, do you have videos or a representation of some of the Prince stuff on that website?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We've got
Okay.
some. We did one of the things that's really wonderful is I mentioned that my house burned down, and when I was able to rebuild my house, I actually built a recording studio in my basement.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty great sort of high technology oriented kind of thing that allows me to use the basement for not only studio recording but also for rehearsals and that kind of stuff. And so basically, I just had everything set up and I pressed record and we recorded a bunch of the rehearsal stuff, and we were able to take those tracks and then kind of go upstairs into the studio part and sweeten them up a little bit. So we've got 4 or 5 Prince songs done by the Big Top that are actually on that website. And then there's a couple of live videos from the show. And so yeah, there's some stuff on there for people to see and listen to. And I was really, really excited about the way some of the tracks turned out. We really, I think anybody who's a real Prince fan will appreciate the fact that we went full ham on this thing. We really got the stuff nailed down. I'm really proud of it.
Well, we'll tell you what, we'll feature that too this morning on the interview, and we'll feature the tune that you sent me as well, so people can kind of hear. Once they hear that Prince tune, they're going to go, "Wow."
Yeah. It's pretty cool. You know, I was really excited about how it turned out, and he's a big hero of mine, so it's definitely a labor of love.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited about that part. And I guess the song that we're going to play is that's mine is going to be "Breathe." Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, and that's a interesting story about that track is that I was kind of doing some research for the Prince gig, and kind of, if you get on the internet and especially now that his stuff is readily available on the internet since he passed,
yeah,
you can go down the rabbit hole and you spend hours and hours finding stuff and tracks and this and that. This road leads to that road, and that road leads to another road. And you see all the people that were involved in the peripheral area of his career, like the time and, the family and people like that. And I got on the website and I was kind of going down the rabbit hole, and I saw this video from St. Paul Peterson from the family.
Yep.
And I think the video is, I believe it was I think the song is "You Got to Love," I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to that video, or watched the video and listened to the song, and I really, really liked the groove. And I was like, man, I want to write a song like that. That's got such a cool vibe to it. And it kind of inspired me to come home and write "Breathe." So it's kind of one of my latest tracks that's, again, Minneapolis influenced for sure, kind of in an indirect way, because I just was exploring stuff and I heard something that really, I kind of got to jamming with the track and was like, wow, that's really cool bass line and really cool, just groove. And so I came home and, got out my toys and started writing a song.
Nice.
And it sort of just fell out,
It's a good track, that's for sure.
Thank you.
Something very original that still has that groove, and I know your music, so I can hear that influence coming out in it. But I think that it speaks highly of how you've integrated all these different sounds.
Yeah, I just as a guitar player, I was not only just into Eddie, but I was into guys like Jeff Beck and Billy Gibbons, and of course Prince, and so I've always kind of prided myself on dumping everything into a pot and stirring it and coming up with a stew that's kind of my own flavor.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, might sound a little facetious to say that, but it just really, to me, I really feel like I'm a real good example of the sum of the influences.
Yeah.
You can hear a little bit of all of that stuff kind of weaved in there, I believe.
Yeah. Especially since I've heard so much of your music. I can hear that in everything you play. I can hear the influence when it gets to whatever style you're doing.
Well, I appreciate that you have been following me for that long.
Yeah.
That's very humbling, and I appreciate that very much.
Man, I think it's been, let's see, I think I met you about 90, 89, 90 maybe?
89, 90. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been
Holy
that. Oh
crap.
my gosh. So that's like what, 10 years? Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Man, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I
Well,
tell you
that's
what,
okay.
though, in the old days, they played
Yeah.
guitar.
That's right. I remember when the Giant record came out.
That disc is permanently in my car. The giant disc.
Of course it is. It
Yeah.
should be.
Yeah.
That's another guy that's just. I mean, come on, man, what a player, Dan Huff,
Dan Huff.
unbelievable. And when the fire happened, they had a. Again, I've been in Nashville for so long that a lot of people know who I am, and the music community really got behind me in an amazing way. And
They did.
Right after my house burned, they had a tribute show for me, like a fundraiser, and they got all these people to come and play. And Giant actually got back together. Mike Brignadello and Dan and David, they all got together and they showed up and played like 4 songs. And I was just, you want to talk about being slack jawed. I was just slobber knockered. There's one of my heroes coming up on stage and saying, "Hey, Todd, I'm here for you." It was the most unbelievable night. I could not, I'm still, it's been a couple of years now and I'm still just flabbergasted that even happened.
I just see.
And
I
Dan,
did. No offense, but I was screaming. My son was sitting here playing video games, and I was watching it on the computer, screaming like they're back. Oh my God, they're back together! And I was like, "Geez, I got to burn down his house again to get these guys back out to play."
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It took something that big, and they actually Dan was like, well, his biggest thing about Giant is that he's like, well, I can't sing like that anymore. I can't sing that high anymore. So they hired this ringer to come in, and he was just the guy was unbelievable. And Dan just stood there and played guitar with the biggest grin on his face all night. And he kind of afterwards, I went up to him to thank him, and I said, "Man, you looked like you were having a blast." And he was like, "Sure, I was. I didn't have to sing." He said, "All I had to do was play guitar." And boy, how did he play guitar?
Yeah, yeah. That guy. You look up guitar, and Dan Huff is next to it.
It's just probably one of the most underrated. I mean, most people just don't even know who he is, but they've heard him because he's been on so many records.
Yeah, and produced.
But he is just unbelievably he's one of the best.
Yes.
He absolutely is one of the best. And he's just one of the nicest guys, getting to know him here in Nashville and getting to actually be friends with him for a long time before all that happened, was just a real amazing thing too. Nashville's a great place to live. You got so many really, really wonderful players here, and just if you're into music, there's probably no better place to live.
Yeah,
I don't
especially
have to tell
now
you that because you're here.
Yeah,
but it's the environment here is just staggering. How you'll be able to literally rub shoulders with legends. It's a pretty amazing thing.
Well, we're talking to Toddzilla this morning, and we need to tell everybody where you are on the web so that they're listening to all these stories, and now they're going to hear where they can find you and maybe see some of this too.
Sure, absolutely. Well, as I said before, I can be found on Facebook. The Big Top site is facebook.com/RNR Big Top. It's also, I have a couple of things on ReverbNation.com.
Mm-hmm.
ReverbNation.com. I think it's The Real Toddzilla /The Real Toddzilla, I think.
Okay.
And I also have a couple of my original acts that I've been making music with for a long time. The band called Jones World, that's my 20-piece funk band. That's on Reverb, ReverbNation.com /Jones World, JONESWORLD. And I also have a power trio that I've made music with for a long time called Funk Hammer. I'm the singer and guitar player, and there's bass player and a drummer, and then we have a couple of girl background singers.
Mm-hmm.
That one's on Reverb Nation as well. ReverbNation.com/Toddzilla's Funk Hammer, all written out. TODDZILLAS. Wait a minute, I lost my place because my girlfriend is saying something in my ear on the phone. Toddzilla's Funk Hammer, TODDZILLAS FUNKHAMMER.
There we go. And I'll put all of those and
You'll have
everything that
links?
you tell me. I'll put links, so it'll be a whole lot easier to get to our KOOL app, and they can just boop right to all the places.
Sure, that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it. Yeah, been making music a long time. Those are my original acts that I've been doing stuff with.
Well, now they can enjoy all the different styles that I've enjoyed over the years, and see maybe what I see and hear what I hear when I listen to your music.
Well, I appreciate that so much. It's I've been hammering away at it for a long time. Done a lot of music, and I'm just continuing to move forward. That's just what you do when you're a musician for life. You just make music. That's what you do. So it just keeps on going, and I'm going to have more stuff up very soon.
Very cool. Toddzilla this morning. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Chris, thank you. It's so good to talk to you. Good to see you.